Hello and welcome to this week's Elite Audio video where I will be revealing the outcome of the review of the HiFi Rose RA280 integrated amplifier that I have been testing rigorously for the last 10 days. To find out how it got on, please stay tuned, all is about to be revealed. Hello and welcome to this week's video, and what a week it has been. I have been exposing myself, for want of a better term, to the abilities of the HiFi Rose RA280 integrated amplifier that we featured as a preview a couple of weeks ago. I have had it installed in my system at home and I have spent every moment I had available and including over the weekend to really put this amplifier through its paces. So before I reveal what my thoughts on the amplifier is, let us have a look at key elements that make this amplifier what it actually is. So part one, let us look at the build quality. So the first thing you're going to notice about this amplifier is that it has, in my opinion, one of the best CNC machined chassis that I have seen on probably any amplifier at this price point. It's very interesting. I think it's quite telling, and it's something that drives me nuts, is that when you look at maybe an amplifier at £5,000 and you tap the top and it rattles because the top panel is vibrating on its own chassis. To me, that is such a design flaw, for want of a better expression, because no doubt when you're playing your music loud, there is a high possibility that elements of that chassis are going to start to vibrate in sympathy with the sound that you're actually playing. You won't see any of this on the HiFi Rose. Every part of this amplifier is machined to perfection. The cutouts for the heat sinks on the top, the way that you've got the embossed HiFi Rose logo on the top panel as well. And equally, the controls on the amplifier, which I think are, firstly, they've got kind of a retro look to them, which I really like. There is also the spacing of them, and I think whilst, when you look at a device, we don't always consider the thought that has gone in to the actual placing of individual controls. I like that the volume control is on the right hand side of the chassis. The spacing between the tone controls is just perfect. I think they're very easy to use, and as I mentioned on the original preview video of the HiFi Rose, there is such a tactile nature to using these. It's something that's almost a part of the experience of this amplifier, and certainly comes under the category or title of build quality. The weighting on the volume control is nigh on perfect. Even the way the power button operates, it's got just the right amount of pressure required to turn it on, and it's quite a reassuring amount of pressure, and you know exactly when the device has been switched on. The tone controls, again, the weight of these is nigh on perfect, and equally the way the switch to defeat these or to put the unit into effectively a bypass mode for the tone controls, that also is perfectly weighted. Again, the inclusion of the VU meters, I really like these. You can turn them off, you can put the illumination switch to 0, and effectively they are not illuminated. But let's be honest, part of the appeal of the retro design of this amplifier is the inclusion of the VU meters. For normal viewing, I think the first position is the right one, but some may prefer it in the brighter operational mode, but you can, as I say, turn these off. And finally, On the far left of the amplifier is the input selector, which again is just beautifully weighted. Every part of this amplifier oozes quality. If I had any criticism to levy at just the general design of the amplifier, it's that when you sit it next to the RS150, it sits quite a noticeable amount shorter than the chassis of the 150. Now, if you've got these on separate shelves, that would probably not be too much of an issue. But if you look at our video when we have them side by side, you can see that this is something that does really stand out. It's a minor thing, but personally, I would have preferred to have seen them at the same height, the same way that they designed the RA180. It's a minor thing, and I guess I'm, really nitpicking or splitting hairs with that particular observation, but it is there nonetheless. Also under build quality, the remote control. This is a lovely metal remote. It doesn't do a great deal in terms of what it'll do. It'll power the amp on, it'll put it into mute, and it will do the volume controls for you. There is no input selector on the remote, which I think personally it should have been included, because to get out of your seat to go and change it, yeah, it's a minor thing, but most amplifiers nowadays have the ability to change input from the remote control. So HiFi Rose, that would have been a nice inclusion had that been there. So let us move on from the build quality and let us look at the overall technical specification and the real internal design features of this amplifier. So one of the headline aspects of this amplifier is the gallium nitride output transistors, or the field effect transistors as they are called. Now what HiFi Rose have learned, and this is something that I believe it's almost groundbreaking in terms of Class D technology. They have used gallium nitride instead of just pure silicon on these transistors. Now, what this means in terms of the actual sound, one of the elements of Class D, and if you go back to the original launch of Class D amplification, a lot of the comments that were, I would say, negatively observed about Class D is that it could sound a little bit harsh and a bit bright. And partly this was to do with what is called it's the switching mode of these transistors, or dead time, if you want to call it that. Now, by using the gallium nitride FETs that HiFi Rose have designed, this means that the dead time is reduced by 90%, so it's only 1/10 of the dead time compared to a normal silicon FET. Now, what this means is it's much more linear in its response. The sound is significantly smoother. So for me, actually, it sounds more like a really good Class A amplifier rather than a Class D. And that's quite an achievement, because it was one of the big negatives that Class D always had being levied against it. It was that kind of stamp, well, it's Class D, and there was an immediate judgment made that it wouldn't have the fluidity or the warmth that we would normally associate with a Class A or Class AB amplifier. So kudos to HiFi Rose for this very important part of the design itself. Now, moving on from the output transistors, we then get to the power supply. Now, one aspect of this, again, they are using silicon carbide FETs. Now, against standard silicon. They seem to have an aversion against standard silicon. I think this is a theme that runs quite clearly through the design process of this amplifier. The big advantage here is it's much more efficient. It produces less heat, which is always an advantage. That also means that when you factor in the 2.5 kilowatts of power factor correction, that means that when the amplifier is under rapid load, so big transients, huge demands for current supply on the amplifier, it means that it delivers that, it always has that in reserve. Now, this reduces distortion, It means that you're going to have much better separation in the sound of the amplifier. And again, in my listening test that we did, that was certainly apparent. There's very little criticism, again, to levy at this aspect of the amplifier's design. And once again, kudos to HiFi Rose for such a very cleverly thought out power supply. When we then look at the amplifier stage, the way this is designed is effectively, it's two separate amplifiers, more like a mono design rather than a stereo design. And it does indeed operate like a mono amplifier in that respect. It's a very cleverly designed circuit, and this amplifier has the ability to produce 250 watts of power into 8 ohms. And trust me when I tell you, that is enough to drive almost any loudspeaker with ease. So let us now get to the crucial part of this review. How does this amplifier sound? So, in a word, this amplifier really does truly defy its price point in terms of its performance. Now, I think if you recall from my original preview on the RA280 that I kind of alluded that straight out of the box this amplifier impressed. And it's quite interesting, when I first put it into my system at home, and this was from Stone Cold, so literally I'd brought it into the house, I removed the amplifier that was already there, and this amplifier that was in there, I won't mention it by name, but it retails about £5,500, and I've had it in my system for about a month. I then put the Rose in, and straight from cold I thought, it's maybe not as good. It sounded maybe initially a little bit thinner. So what I did was, because we were still in part of the burning process here, I left the amplifier on repeat play. I was streaming from an RS150B, and I let it run 24 hours before then listening again. And interestingly, even in that 24-hour period, the tonal presentation had changed quite dramatically. That thinness had disappeared. There was certainly much more body and warmth to the presentation, and even at higher volumes there was zero harshness. And just to be sure, I put the existing amplifier back in again, and my initial impression then had reversed. So I felt that the first thought of the Rose isn't quite as good to actually I think the Rose is better. And that's quite a statement to make, because we're looking at something that in real terms is £2,500 less than the amplifier I had in there. Now, if you want to know what it is, if you drop me an email directly, so I'll bring that up on screen now, I'll be happy to provide you with that information and what my thoughts were on the comparisons. But obviously the review here is pure tracks on screen that we use to test this amplifier, because there's a wide range. One of my favourites, and you'll know this from my review videos, is Sansom Danse Macabre. It's a beautifully written piece of music, and I've got to say Sansom did a remarkable job. In fact, it amazes me the true composers of classical music and how they put that all together, every single instrument having its own place. These were true masters of sound. So this is quite a demanding track. It starts off very easy and it builds and builds and builds, and suddenly, bam, you get this huge transient putting the amplifier under incredible load. And I've mentioned the story before where I was testing a Lindemann power amplifier, and when it came to this point in the music, the amplifier literally turned itself off. It couldn't, its protection circuit recognised that the current demand had the potential to do some terminal damage to the amplifier, so it turned the amp off completely. And since that experience, it's always made me a little bit nervous when I get to this point in the music. So generally I'll start at a moderate volume, have a listen, see how it sounds, and I'll gradually increase the volume in steady increments until it gets to the point where it's really too loud to listen to see how the amplifier copes with this transient. And I can say the Rose passed this test with flying colours. In fact, even when we're getting to volumes where it was uncomfortable to listen to, the Rose didn't lose its composure. Now, based on the technical specifications that I've covered on this amplifier, that again speaks fantastically well of the design ethos and the testing that HiFi Rose have obviously put this amplifier through. Obviously there's filter down from the RA180 into this amplifier, but actually in my opinion, I think this amplifier, which doesn't have a lot of the RA280 features, I think that's a good thing. Some of the features in the RA280 I felt were a bit too complex. Things like the active crossover control was beyond the scope of most people's understanding of how they would use that. The ability to bridge it to effectively dual mono from 4-channel output was a good thing, but I wasn't entirely sure that it improved the sound in any way. My opinion is that, and having really spent a lot of time listening to this amplifier, is it has improved the sound in ways that I didn't expect for less money. Yes, it doesn't have a lot of these features, but it offers more, I think, in terms of overall sound quality. And for me personally, that's far more important. In terms of inputs, if you go to the rear panel, you'll see there's 3 line level inputs. There is also a moving magnet phono stage, which I'll cover in a second. And you also have a set of balanced inputs as well. There's a full frequency or full range subwoofer output as well. And then there's the usual 4 binding posts for your loudspeaker connections, then a standard IEC input on the far left rear of the amplifier itself. Overall, it's got most things you would need. It doesn't have a digital input, but I feel if you're going for the purest separates route, then again, that's no bad thing, because if you're matching it with a HiFi Rose RS150 or 250, the DAC is already built in, so that's a feature to a certain extent that would be redundant in that type of matched component setup. Very quickly on the moving magnet phono stage, I tested it with a John Mayer live album, and again there's quite a lot of different types of tracks on this album, so it was quite a good test. I would say it performs as good as any other amplifier I've heard with a moving magnet phono stage. Obviously, if vinyl really is your thing, you'll have your own phono stage and you'll use a line input or balanced if that's the route you're going to go. But for general use, I felt the moving magnet phono stage was certainly more than adequate, and it gave a good sound that was enjoyable overall. But the key feature to this amplifier is that it really has a true sense of luxury when you use this. It feels like a high-end component. Honestly, if someone had told me, so again, if this was a piece of equipment just presented, I had no idea of its price point, listened to it, touched it, used it, and spent some time with tracks that I was familiar with, it certainly gave me a true sense of a high-end component, and I would have been genuinely surprised when the price point had been revealed at the end of all that testing. It really is remarkable. I think the thing I love about it is it has the ability to be tuned to sound exactly how you want it. The tone controls have got 15 dB of adjustability. So, and the other very clever thing, the way they've built these tone controls in, and sometimes when you use tone controls it can muddy the mid-range. This does not happen with the HiFi Rose. And to dial in the sound you want is exceptionally easy. And I must admit, I kind of found my sweet spot. I used the tone controls and I got it sounding exactly how I wanted. It meant that every piece of music I was playing, I was like, wow, this is really good. And I said it has this kind of high-end luxury feel that just makes you want to sit down at night, get all the candles on in your listening room, grab your favourite tipple and sit there and actually enjoy the music. And I think what I found, rather than being analytical about the sound, I found myself enjoying the music rather than, which I sometimes have a habit of doing when I'm testing, is going from this track to this track to this track and not really enjoying it all the way through. The fact that I found myself almost compelled not to do that really speaks volumes of my personal view on how this amplifier sounds. It has the ability to give you the blackest of black, so the noise floor is 0. and the sound appears from this inky blackness in a way that is quite captivating. It's very musical, and it doesn't have what anyone would consider to be a typical Class D sound, and all the better for it, in my opinion. And this kind of bad rap that Class D gets, albeit HiFi Rose class it as a Class AD amplifier with the gallium nitride aspects that we've discussed earlier on in the video, this really bears fruit in terms of what you get to hear. I think the separation, even under extreme load and with large dynamics, is exceptional. And quite honestly, if you have a budget of around £3,000, there is no question this amplifier should be on your shortlist. In fact, even if you've got a budget beyond that, I would still say this amplifier deserves inclusion, because it really does seem to perform above its price point based on my own listening tests. Now, I tested it with a pair of Revival Audio Atlanti 5s. I was using some high diamond loudspeaker cable and high diamond interconnects, which I've used in my system at home, which are about to be changed for Zen Sati. More of that in a future video. But the holographic aspect of the sound was exceptional. The sound seemed to really sit well above the loudspeakers, which I really liked. There was depth to it. The bass control was visceral and fast, and it was deep. There was no bass overhang, and it certainly didn't feel lethargic, which again is one of the key things that Class D does bring. It's got good pace, very clean, but when I say clean, I don't mean it was dry and clinical. It was very clean in terms of that the tonality of instruments was very realistic. And I think as I went through, and you'll see from the test tracks that are brought up on screen, there's quite a variety of different music genres in there. And I think, you know, I'm a classically trained violinist, and violin is one of, in my opinion, the most difficult instruments to reproduce in an audio system that sounds realistic. It always sounds a bit synthetic, almost like a facsimile of the original. And on Sanson Dance Macabre, that initial opening part where there is a solo violin and just the sound of the actual violin itself, I'm very used to how that would sound, you know, up close and playing it. The tone of the bow going across the string and just that general sound, it sounded very real to me. So when something does that and it captures me that way, I know it's doing something really good. So in conclusion, there is absolutely no doubt this is a fantastic amplifier for its price point. I think HiFi Rose should be really commended in producing something that sounds this good for this price. I think the build quality is exceptional. I think the only criticism that I levied at the start of the video is the fact that the remote control doesn't have the ability to change the inputs at all. That will bother some people. I'm not too bothered, because the sound ultimately is really all that matters, and that's where this amplifier scores exceptionally highly. So this amplifier gets one of our highest recommendations. It is frankly one of the best in its class. I think you'll be hard pushed to find something to top it for its price. I think that it, in terms of build quality, sound quality, internal specification, everything about this amplifier oozes class, and that is not something you normally see at this price. There's some good amplifiers in this price point, but they don't have the look, feel, construction and sound quality and flexibility that this amplifier has. The ability to dial in your sound so very easily is a massive plus point. It means you're not just stuck with what you hear. All our rooms are compromises. Our furnishings, the room construction, shape, size, everything has an impact and produces room modes that will either give you peaks and troughs in different frequencies. So the ability to be able to at least compensate for that in an analog way, that you can tune it and tune it and tune it rather than running like an EQ across the room, means that you can actually get the flavor. So this season to taste part that I've mentioned before is very easy to achieve with the HiFi Rose. So it gets our Outstanding Product Award, rightly so. It is a brilliant amplifier and it absolutely deserves inclusion on your shortlist if you are looking for an amplifier at this price point. If you're interested in trialing one, we will offer you a full 30-day money-back guarantee. That's how confident we are in this amplifier. Well, I'll put a link in the video description where you can view it and buy it. But why not give us a call? Here's our phone number. You can phone us up, have a chat about your requirements. We can also take your existing amplifier as a part exchange against the Rose. And I think for those that are fortunate enough to buy this amplifier, they'll very quickly realise they've made a very astute decision based on its price and performance ratio, which is where this amplifier shines through. So there we go. Great amp, great price, and an amazing sound. And as always at this point in the video, this is where I ask for a very small favour. If you're enjoying the content of what we're producing, please like our video and subscribe. It means such a great deal to us, and I've mentioned before, we're a small team of professional hi-fi enthusiasts here at Elite Audio. We care passionately about what we do, and you subscribing to our YouTube channel really matters to us a great deal. It gives us that incentive to keep producing more and more and more interesting content. That's what we want to do. And thank you to all of you who have already subscribed. I honestly can't thank you enough. When I see the likes going up and the subscriptions going up, it is massive for us. Honestly, it's such, we get a buzz from it, so I can't thank you enough. And finally, again, if you want to message me directly, please feel free to do so. I will answer every single email, and keep the comments coming as well. It's great to see what you think about what we are producing and the components that we are giving you insight into. It's also great to read what you think about what we've done, and even to hear about some of your own systems. So put some information about your own systems in some of the comments. That's great to hear too. So next week we will be featuring the Revival Audio Atalante 4s that have recently been reviewed by Terry Ellis in Pursuit of Perfect System, and also the speakers that we had at the Bristol Hi-Fi show a couple of weeks ago. So I'll be doing some an in-depth review on what their key elements are, so please tune in for that next week. So until then, have a great week listening to music. And as you know, as far as I'm concerned, listening to music is one of the most therapeutic and most beneficial things you can do for your health, both physical and mental. The two are directly connected. So thank you for us having the great opportunity to listen to some great audio devices and fantastic music too. Actually, if you've got any suggested test tracks, please put them in the comments as well. I'd love to hear what you guys are listening to as well. So until next week, please take care, and thank you for watching.